Let me ask you a question that most analysts avoid. If Ibrahim Traoré disappeared tomorrow, not assassinated, not arrested, just removed, who would celebrate first? Not who would issue statements. Not who would pretend to be shocked. Who would quietly benefit before the sun even rises? Because power does not wait for funerals. It moves immediately. And tonight, we are going to map exactly who gains, who loses, and why Burkina Faso sits at the center of a much larger chessboard. Stay with me, because this is not about one man. It's about what he disrupted. This question only exists for one reason. Traoré changed the rules too fast. In less than 3 years, Burkina Faso rejected external military dominance, reclaimed control over security operations, refused political obedience disguised as partnership, and spoke openly about sovereignty in a region trained to whisper. That kind of shift creates enemies automatically, not because of ideology, but because systems were interrupted. When a system benefits powerful interests, any disruption becomes dangerous. So let's be clear. This analysis is not about whether Traoré is good or bad. It's about what happens to power flows if he is gone. Because power always flows somewhere. It doesn't evaporate. It doesn't pause. It redirects. And the question of where it redirects reveals everything about who really controls what in West Africa. If Traoré is removed, the first beneficiaries are not global powers. They are regional intermediaries. The ones who lost contracts, lost influence, lost military coordination, lost access. These actors don't need chaos. They need reversal. A return to fragmented command, negotiated insecurity, advisory presence, and delayed decision-making. Traoré unified military command and cut hesitation. Without him, uncertainty returns, and uncertainty is profitable. Think about what happens when authority fragments. Militias suddenly have negotiating power again. Borders soften because coordination breaks down. Security assistance becomes necessary again, not as a choice, but as the only option presented. This is where money re-enters quietly. Not through invasion, not through obvious intervention, but through the patient rebuilding of dependencies that Traoré spent 3 years dismantling. The organizations that used to provide training, that used to coordinate operations, that used to sit in briefing rooms and influence decisions, they don't disappear when their access is cut, they wait. They maintain relationships with officers who feel sidelined. They keep communication channels open with politicians who preferred the old arrangements. And the moment the center weakens, they move. Not with press conferences, but with phone calls, private meetings, offers of support that come with conditions so reasonable they're hard to refuse. Next comes a much larger group. Foreign interests that lost military positioning, strategic leverage, intelligence access, and narrative control. These actors don't need Burkina Faso to collapse. They need it manageable. A Burkina Faso that asks for help, accepts conditions, waits for approval, and balances instead of decides. Traoré's biggest offense was not alignment. It was independence. He reduced dependency. And in international relations, reducing dependency is more threatening than changing sides. Because when you change sides, you're still playing the game. When you reduce dependency, you're suggesting the game itself is optional. If he's removed, the conversation resets immediately. Stability concerns, transition frameworks, inclusive dialogue, international oversight. These phrases are not neutral. They are gateways. Watch how the language shifts after any leadership change in Africa. The first 48 hours are crucial. Statements from foreign ministries, from international organizations, from think tanks, they don't demand anything overtly. They express concern, they offer assistance, they suggest processes. And each suggestion carries weight because it comes packaged with resources, with recognition, with the promise of normalcy. The new leadership, uncertain and seeking legitimacy, finds these offers hard to refuse, not because they're weak, but because they're isolated. And isolation makes reasonable-sounding proposals irresistible. This is how leverage returns, not through force, but through the appearance of having no other choice. The military needs equipment. Where does it come from? The economy needs investment. Who provides it? The government needs international recognition. Who grants it? Each answer recreates a dependency that Traore spent years cutting. And once those dependencies are re-established, the conditions attached to them become impossible to resist. Now let's talk about the most obvious beneficiaries: armed groups. Not because Traore targeted them rhetorically, but because he denied them time. His doctrine removed safe waiting zones, predictable patrol patterns, long negotiation cycles.
If leadership changes suddenly, operations pause, chains of command reconfigure, intelligence flows slow. That pause is oxygen. Even short confusion gives armed groups recruitment space, reorganization time, movement, freedom. This is why leadership stability matters more than ideology in counter-terror operations. Consistency kills momentum. Uncertainty feeds it. Armed groups don't need a weak opponent. They need an uncertain one. They need security forces that hesitate, that wait for orders that don't come clearly, that second-guess their authority to act. The history of successful counterinsurgency anywhere in the world shows the same pattern. When leadership is stable and decision-making is fast, armed groups lose initiative. They spend their energy surviving instead of expanding. They react instead of act. But when leadership changes, when new commanders need time to understand the situation, when political uncertainty makes everyone cautious, armed groups regain the initiative they'd lost. They move into areas they'd been pushed out of. They recruit from populations that had started to trust the government. They rebuild networks that had been disrupted. And here's what makes this particularly dangerous in the Sahel. These groups aren't isolated cells anymore. They're part of regional networks with communication systems, funding sources, and strategic coordination that spans multiple countries. When one government weakens, even temporarily, the entire network benefits. They shift resources, redirect fighters, intensify operations in the weak zone. A leadership transition in Ouagadougou doesn't just affect Burkina Faso. It changes the calculation for armed groups operating across Mali, Niger, and northern coastal states. Every power vacuum attracts insiders, not enemies, opportunists, individuals who believe this is their moment. These are not necessarily traitors. They are ambitious officers, political survivors, institutional climbers. When a central figure is removed, loyalty fractures, alignments shift, old rivalries resurface. The danger is not immediate overthrow. It's internal paralysis. Decisions slow, orders get questioned, initiative dies. And once initiative dies, external pressure returns with force. This is the pattern that's destroyed functioning states before. Not invasion, not coup, but the slow paralysis that comes from everyone waiting to see which way the wind blows before committing to any action. Officers stop acting decisively because they're unsure if the new leadership will support them. Politicians stop making bold moves because they don't know if they'll still have positions next month. Bureaucrats slow everything down because survival means not taking risks. This internal paralysis is exactly what external actors need. They don't need to create chaos. They just need to wait for the paralysis to create vulnerabilities, then offer solutions that re-establish their influence. The country becomes manageable again, not through conquest, but through its own internal hesitation. Now let's flip the question. Who loses first if Traore is removed? Not the government, the population. Because security operations pause before policies change. People feel the gap immediately. Roads become risky again. Markets hesitate. Movement shrinks. Confidence evaporates fast. Think about what daily life requires. The ability to travel between towns without fear. The confidence to plant crops, knowing you'll be able to harvest them. The security to send children to school without wondering if they'll come home. These things depend on consistent security operations.
And consistent security operations depend on clear command structures and confident leadership. When leadership changes, even if the replacement is capable, there's a gap. Orders are reviewed. Operations are reassessed. And in that gap, the violence that had been pushed back returns. The second losers are soldiers, not because they supported one man, but because clarity disappears. Nothing demoralizes a force faster than unclear authority, political hesitation, and mixed messaging. Soldiers are asked to risk their lives. They will do that when they trust the command structure, when they believe their actions serve a clear purpose, when they know decisions are being made by people who understand what's happening on the ground. Remove that clarity, and you don't just lose effectiveness, you lose the willingness to take risks that operations require. And the third losers? The idea of African strategic autonomy. Because one removal reinforces a dangerous lesson. Independence invites instability. This is the lesson that echoes across the continent. Every time a leader who challenged external influence is removed, every time a government that tried to chart an independent course collapses, it sends a message to other leaders considering similar paths. The message is simple: don't try it. Dependency is safer than sovereignty. Compliance is more stable than independence. This is not about one country. It's about precedent. Burkina Faso became a symbol, intentionally or not. If Traore stands, it signals sovereignty is sustainable. Decisiveness works. External pressure can be resisted. If he's removed, it signals the opposite. And symbols matter more than facts in geopolitics, because other nations are watching quietly, learning, calculating. Leaders across Africa face similar pressures. They see what Traore attempted. They understand the appeal of his approach to their own populations, but they also calculate the risks. If Traore succeeds long-term, if Burkina Faso stabilizes and prospers under independent policies, that changes the calculation. It makes the risk worth taking. But if he's removed, if Burkina Faso descends into chaos or reverts to dependency, the lesson is clear. Stay in line. Accept the terms. Don't challenge the system. This is why Burkina Faso's trajectory matters far beyond its borders. It's a test case being watched across Francophone Africa, across the Sahel, across the continent. Not just by governments, but by populations. If this experiment in sovereignty works, it becomes a model. If it fails, it becomes a warning. So let me end with the only question that actually matters. If Traore is removed, does Burkina Faso revert, or does it continue without him? Because real leadership is not about permanence. It's about whether a system survives its founder. If the doctrine holds, the pressure fails. If the doctrine collapses, the removal succeeds. That is the real battlefield. Not Ouagadougou, not borders, but continuity. Has Traore built institutions that can function without him? Has he developed a command structure that operates on principles rather than personal loyalty? Has he created a political culture where sovereignty is a shared commitment rather than one man's vision? These questions determine everything, because if the answer is no, if everything depends on his personal authority, then his removal ends the experiment. But if the answer is yes, if he's built something that survives him, then his removal might even strengthen the system by proving it doesn't need him. This is the difference between cult of personality and institutional transformation. Cults of personality collapse when the personality is removed. Institutional transformations continue because they're embedded in how things actually work. The question is which one Burkina Faso has become. Now tell me in the comments, and be honest, if Traore disappeared tomorrow, would Burkina Faso stand firmer or fracture? And if you want more deep African geopolitical breakdowns that go beyond headlines and noise, subscribe, because power doesn't announce itself. It moves quietly.